to Dr. Kirk, our professor, to my classmates, grace and peace. What a joy it has been studying with you all and hearing, being able to communicate through our discussion board. I'm so enlightened and encouraged by all that has been said these last few weeks. This week's video discussion is about creating community. And I believe part and parcel of preaching is not just what we say, but how we say it. So to that end, Dr. James Massey says in his book, The Burdensome Joy of Preaching, our textbook, togetherness between preacher and people is often encouraged by our means of appeal. Specific preparation for pulpit presupposes a clear objective to be reached by preaching and some appealing of means by which that objective is pursued. He says the framework, the structure, and sequencing of the message should have appeal. It should be planned well to elicit interest and reward that interest through shared insight and guided reflection. Because interest and concerns is not universal. It's oftentimes based on individual life. It's based on cultural differences. It's sometimes based on geographical location. It's not universal is the drive. So Massey goes on to say this: appeal in preaching often depends on the right words for one seeks to share. And so to that same end, Dr. Haddon Robinson says in his book, Biblical Preaching, the effectiveness of our sermons depends on two factors: what we say and how we say it. Both are important. Apart from life-related biblical content, we have nothing worth communicating. But without skillful delivery, we will not get that content across to the congregation. Then I was reading another essay that was written by Pastor Dave Eliff. He is the lead pastor of the Roots Church in Seattle, Washington. He wrote an article that was later produced by the Southwestern Theological Seminary, and it was entitled Exegeting the Audience. And he says this, that a prepared preacher knows the passage well, but he also knows the people well. Eliff goes on to say this: for every pastor who desires to preach, there must first be an humbling understanding that God has led them to the people and the place he wants them to shepherd. Without that recognition, there are two ditches that the pastor preacher can unintentionally fall into when preaching. First, preaching to a different crowd than the one that's in front of him. Secondly, neglecting to preach to those who he desires to reach. So again, the idea for us is not just what we say, but how we say it. A couple Sundays ago, I got an opportunity to preach the celebration worship experience for graduates of 2024. And it was a passage that I had preached several times before, but this time, not only was the construction different, but the appeal was different. And it just only reminds me that before we can stand, because we've done proper exegesis of the scripture or the text, we have to exegete our audience. Because exegeting our audience is important for the overall appeal of the passage to be made known, not just to those of us who hear the scripture, but a specific audience, the audience that's in front of us. And so ultimately, our desire when we stand and preach is for God to bless the preaching, not just in the speaking, but also in the hearing. And for that to happen, we have to remember to, as much as we can, gauge what we say, how we say it, to appeal to the audience that is in front of us. Again, grace and peace. Thank you for this time. And I pray that the next couple of weeks will be just as great as the past couple of weeks. You be blessed.